What's the one thing in your people strategy that, if fixed today, will drive the 10x growth?
To present this, our speaker for this session is Ms. Hamsaz Wadhwani, HR strategist and founder of the Seventh Fold.
Good afternoon, everyone. My topic is going to be largely for a lot of the fintech entrepreneurs that are looking to scale up, and that's the broad principles of HR, which are very important for any startup and especially for the fintech world. So that is what I'm going to talk about. I do feel that at the end of the day, when you look at any fintech actually, if you think about how the founders probably started off one or two and moved to 1,000+ employees in less than a decade, you will realize that it was not just the product or the technology or the funding. Of course, those were important aspects, but the way they managed their talent, whether it was hiring, retaining, developing talent, that sort of was the key to their success and growth. So I'm going to talk about some of those tenets, very simple stuff. Here is just a quick timeline to understand what role does HR play or should play, if at all, when it comes to organizations that are looking to scale up. The first 20 employees, and largely, I don't know at what all of you, what is the employee base that I'm looking at here. Basically, 0 to 20, HR doesn't play any role. It's largely a lot of hiring from an HR perspective that happens, mostly done by the founder. But from the 20 to 100, that is where HR has to be sort of woven in the organization. And you might, at this point, hire someone who can be an external HR consultant or sort of a shared head HR who can oversee a lot of things that are happening in the organization. So because you're suddenly now starting to put a little bit of a structure to all the madness that's happened so far. Then from 100 to 300 is where you will have to scale up HR to different units, saying recruitment, talent, engagement, performance, all of that, because now that's the need. And from a 300 plus employees, that is when you need a senior head HR who's also part of your management committee. I mean, you need to have that kind of importance given to HR by having the person as part of your executive committee as well. So that is just a very quick timeline, just to understand how HR moves. So these are the 4 things that I'm going to just quickly touch upon. But hiring the A team and the performance management becomes the most important part, right? The other 2, of course, important, but those 2 become the most important part for any fintech, I feel, or any startup as well. So let's look at the hiring the A team part. So when you're hiring your team, what do you look at largely? Okay, you will look at maybe experience, maybe the best of B schools, maybe you're looking at skills, etc. But a lot of what I have seen in my experience, that a lot of startups and a lot of fintechs have made this error, is where they haven't really assessed the mindset. And I feel that that plays a very big role in any success of a fintech. The kind of mindset of the people that you hire. So when I say mindset, what do I really mean? One is the agility. That is one of the most important pieces. You need someone who can shift gears very quickly. So are you really assessing this while you're hiring? Or are we just looking at only the broad experience, intelligence, etc. and hiring? Yeah. The other important aspect that I've seen is someone who can tolerate ambiguity, because there is going to be a lot of an unstructured environment. Things will move very fast, and so you need someone who doesn't need clarity every step of the way. So are you hiring people who can be tolerant of ambiguity? And the last thing, which I think is the most important part, which many organizations miss out, is the alignment. Now, when you have a person joining you, you aren't just looking at a good reward structure to attract him. He needs to be someone who is genuinely interested in your vision, who genuinely aligns with your way of running business. And not just your vision, right? But your way of doing things. So for example, if your organization needs a little bit long hours, needs the stretch, then while you're hiring the person, your campus presentation cannot say 9 to 6, Monday to Friday. Because you are then going to land up hiring people who need that. So a lot of organizations make this mistake because you want to hire the best talent. So you want to kind of showcase your brand well. But showcasing the brutal reality is also as important, because that way only those people will come in who can live in environments where agility and ambiguity are fine. Yeah, otherwise you'll land up hiring people who, if you in fact think of any mishire in the last whatever years, think back, there'll be one of these three missing. It won't be for skill. Most of the times, it will be because of one of these three mindset issues. So this is just from a building the A-team perspective. So when we look at the performance bit, which is the next, okay, the GFR bit that I think most of you must be familiar with, and all organizations, when they look at this, they feel, this so is there, okay? But actually, the finer details which are important are usually missing. Ask any of your employees, what are your top 3 priorities? Okay, and if you don't get the right answer, then your goal setting process is not good enough. Having very clear, specific goals, and what again, you can't have things like, okay, customer service. You have to say, okay, resolving queries in 30 minutes, right? We all know the SMART goals part, but usually we feel it's so difficult in this environment, and we just end up putting very broad sentences which really don't mean anything to the person who's got them as goals. So being as specific, whether it be on timelines, quality, customer feedback, putting in as much of the quantifiable goals as possible becomes very, very important. Feedback, again, a lot of organizations, they give feedback when something goes wrong. But that's not feedback, really, that's just firefighting. So you need, especially in this environment, which is so fast-paced, if you wait for your annual appraisal to give feedback, it's really doing disservice to the employees. You need to have systems which are either quarterly inbuilt systems, and it can be just a 15-minute conversation where you're looking at, okay, what went right, what didn't go right, what can you do about it, what are you going to do about the next quarter goals, right? It's just a very quick conversation, but it is so powerful because a lot of times entrepreneurs feel that, okay, they know the project didn't go well, or the customer was pissed off, or still your feedback, what you know, they don't know. And that feedback sharing is the most crucial part when we look at really performance management for a fintech. So that is one piece. Again, rewards, they become even more important than feedback, or equally important. The whole aspect, now rewards is something that I can itself talk for 2 hours because it's such an important part. One is that, of course, if you're able to give ESOPs, again, not many organizations can, but if you really want an ownership mindset, then giving this kind of stock definitely helps. So ESOPs, if you're not into the funding bit at all, then giving phantom ESOPs, that's a concept that works as well. Or you can just simply give cash long-term incentives, which are just like, cliffs. After 4 years, you just get it, kind of a reward system. You definitely need organization performance-related incentives, which will be tied in with either the overall organization's performance, or they could even be specific to the department, basis how big is your organization. So department performance, and then, of course, the individual performance. what I've seen invariably, a lot of entrepreneurs, they do that. They fall in the trap of saying, isko ye de dete, usko wo dete, he needs the money, yaar. And the whole performance appraisal is done in that fashion, which kind of doesn't work. You will have good employees leave you, mind you, if you do not have differentiated your incentives or your compensation, if it's not differentiated for performance. Yeah. So that again, the whole philosophy has to be very, very important. It has to tie in with your fintech's vision very clearly of what you see happening over the 4 or 5 years. So this piece again becomes very important for fintechs. And the whole part of exits here again, some do too early, too many, too soon, and then there are some who completely shy away from it, who probably don't know how to do it, who just let non-performers continue, and it kind of puts the whole stress and the whole burden on those guys who are performing and result in their burnout. So exiting at the right time, having a very clear performance improvement plan and an exit process and policy. You might not have other HR policies, but this part is very important. Culture has to be by design and not just default. Again, when you're a smaller organization, culture is largely driven by the founders. But once you scale up, your culture is going to have its own personality. And very little sometimes that then you can do to change it. Right? It takes years to change a bad culture. So setting in from the beginning, working on some of these tenets. Again, every organization is different, and so your culture parameters might be very different. Like you might want innovation as one of the things in your culture to be added. You might want collaboration as a very important piece in your culture. But largely what I have seen, some of the things that are very important for the fintechs is the whole ownership mindset. They can't just be doers. They have to own the outcomes, right? So, and how do you do that? By giving a lot of even sort of responsibility when it comes to making decisions, right? Decentralizing that to a great extent. Being okay with mistakes. All of those things become important when you want an ownership mindset. Invariably, and I have a lot of large clients as my customer as well, and they always complain about this ownership mindset. But when you look at what are the things they do, they're risk averse. They might not be okay with failure. So that is when you are curbing your ownership mindset. So working around this part is one of the things. Speed and agility, I don't need to talk about this amongst you guys. That's one of the most core things for any fintech. And so you kind of have to build that culture where people learn from whatever mistakes, failures, issues, and sort of move on and show the speed in everything that they do. And trust and transparency, it has to be where you kind of are enough transparent so that there is that trust built. And you also trust them to get the trust back from them as well. So these are some of the tenets. Like I said, you might need some others specific to your organization. 3 critical leadership shifts that are important. 1, again, if you look at the same timeline, in the initial part, the leader is the doer. That is just how it is. But very quickly, that same leader becomes the bottleneck when it reaches the growing stage, the early growth stage. So are you at this stage, what is required of a leader is to be someone who moves from a doer to a leader. Being, again, delegating, decentralizing, decision-making, delegation, a lot of that has to happen at this stage, which sometimes doesn't happen. The second one is then you move to building leaders in your organization when you're in the scaling mode, because you can't do the scaling yourself as a single leader. So building a leadership bench in your organization, the middle-level managers, your mid to senior level leaders, that becomes your main priority. So now you've moved from being a leader to building leaders. Of course, the last piece is when you kind of have built a completely executive leadership team. And like I mentioned, that is where you also hire a senior head of HR who's part of your executive committee, right? So you've built a team, and your role now should definitely not be in operations at all. It should just largely lie as a visionary. than sort of being part of the team that is leading everything. So this is the 3 leadership shifts. So what's the important question is, what's the one thing in your people strategy that if fixed today will drive the 10x growth? You have to ask yourself this question. It's very important. And if you have an answer to this, you could, of course, also reach out to me and we can discuss this further. But know that your 10x growth will always also have to have an HR element to it. Here are some of the... So we've built some very carefully curated guides. One is a performance management guide for the fintechs, and one is the HR sort of detailed checklist. So in case any of you wants to download that, these are free currently. You can download these as well. So with that, a big thank you for attending this. I know this must be one different session from all the other sessions that are happening in these 2 days.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this informative session.